Ναι, ναι, σε όλα, σε ό,τι Yes. Are you enjoying it? Happy to be here in this context.
Dear Prime Minister Mitsotakis, dear President Lagarde, dear Finance Minister Hatzidakis, dear colleagues and partners, it is a great pleasure to welcome you, the Governing Council of the ECB, to the Bank of Greece. It's been a long time, 15 years, since we last met here. What has happened since then is well known to all of us. It is now part of our shared history. What is important is that we are all now wiser, stronger, closer to each other, better prepared to tackle difficulties, more European. Ladies and gentlemen, this room was designed to host esteemed guests like you and is decorated with paintings made by some of the most important modern Greek artists. But the most beautiful side of this room you can see outside. To my left, it's the Acropolis of Athens with the Parthenon, its central temple. There is hardly an end to the list of things that one can say about the Acropolis. The history, architecture, and art of the monuments on this rocky hill have inspired many historians, artists, and researchers. The Parthenon was built between 447 and 438 BC, almost 2,500 years ago, during the so-called Golden Age of Pericles, the Athenian politician inextricably linked with the heyday of democracy, demokratia, literally the power of the people, as a form of government that was destined to have a profound impact on the development of the Western world. The Acropolis is the most accurate reflection of the splendor, power, and wealth of 5th century Athens, a city-state at the peak of its glory. And it has the Parthenon located at the most conspicuous point. The Parthenon was dedicated to the goddess Athena, who was much more than a patron goddess of Athens. She was the apotheosis or deification of the Athenian city. The Parthenon was built by Ictinus and Callicrates, two famous architects of the time. Its pedimental sculptures, frieze and metopes, faces, were the work of a team coordinated by master sculptor Phidias. Phidias also created the gold and ivory statue of Athena, goddess Athena, inside the temple. We'll have the opportunity to see most of it on Friday. The Parthenon was the most decorated monument of its time, celebrated as an important milestone in the history of world art. But looking at it only from the perspective of artistic value misses an important point, namely the deeper meaning of the iconography of the two sets of sculptural reliefs on the outside and the inside of the colonnade adorning the temple. This iconography includes ordinary Athenian citizens shown in the continuous frieze juxtaposed with the stories that adorn its 92 metopes faces, depicting fights against the mythical giants, against the half-human, half-horse centaurs, as well as the Amazons and the Trojans. These stories had been very popular in Greece since the archaic period, but they are given a new dimension here, created only one generation after the sack of Athens by the invading Persian army, followed by the eventual victory of democratic Athens over the might of the Persian king. These images were allegories of the conflict between liberty and democracy on the one hand and autocracy on the other, and the victory of the former over the latter. So you see, the Parthenon is not just a miracle of architectural harmony. It is also a symbol of the resilience and eventual victory of democratic institutions and of a form of government based on the will of the people over the absolute power of the authoritarian ruler. The essence of this unity between the spirit of democracy and the flourishing of creativity manifested in the Parthenon was revisited again and again in later centuries. The rediscovery of classical civilization, preserved in the monastic traditions of Eastern and Western Christianity in medieval times, was rekindled in Italy as early as the 13th century with the poetry of Dante and the paintings of Giotto, and culminated in the Renaissance, when an erudition leading to the concept of Homo Universalis was pursued. The Renaissance, which spanned over the 15th and the 16th centuries, was intellectually based on a version of humanism derived from the Roman concept of humanitas, but also on a rediscovery of classical Greek philosophy, including Protagoras' famous statement that man is the measure of all things, essentially re-establishing the human at the center of the cosmos. This new way of thinking, introduced by the Renaissance, affected art, architecture, politics, science, and literature, and inspired magnificent progress in these areas. It was a way of thinking that emanated from a renewed interest in the art and values of classical antiquity, as well as from a drive to understand the world and change it. It was in such a context that there emerged the scientific revolution and the works of Francis Bacon, John Locke, among many others. The Renaissance also sowed the seeds of the upcoming movements of neoclassicism and, of course, the Enlightenment. Neoclassicism was born in Rome in the 18th century after the discovery of Pompeii and Herculaneum, but its popularity spread all over Europe as a generation of Europeans who visited Italy as part of the Grand Tour returned home with newly refound Greco-Roman ideals. The primary neoclassical belief was that art should express the ideal virtues in life, which were aligned with ancient Greek ideas, such as purity and simplicity of form, decorum, verisimilitude or realism, and should serve a purpose. Art was also seen as capable of improving the viewer by imparting a moralizing message that resonated with these ancient ideas. Neoclassicism, in its most part, coincided with the Enlightenment, which centered around ideas such as the value of human happiness, the pursuit of knowledge obtained by means of reason and the evidence of the senses, and also ideals such as natural law, liberty, progress, tolerance, fraternity, constitutional government. Of course, our world today is very different from that of the golden age of Athenian democracy and Pericles. However, important dimensions of the bond that unite us as Europeans harken back to ideas and developments which first emerged, albeit in fledgling form, in the streets, groves, and civic meetings surrounding the Acropolis of Athens. So, as Europeans today, we believe in democracy, we strive for science and knowledge, we have faith in human accomplishment, we admire beauty, we go after excellence. Certainly, our contemporary European values have also been enriched with fresh ideas, new trends, and norms. The contemporary world has been shaped by multiple revolutions and long processes of evolution, producing often disruptive, but mostly positive change, which could not have been imaginable in 5th century Athens. This is not to say that there aren't other aspects emerging from ancient Greece that could serve as points of inspiration today. The victory after the naval battle of Salamis against the Persians led to the expansion of the democratic institutions already introduced by Clisthenes. In democratic Athens, all citizens enjoyed equality before the law, as well as equality of vote and equal opportunity to assume political office. The population doubled during the years of Pericles, with thousands of immigrants contributing to the demographic growth of Athens. Ancient Greeks also conducted free trade with almost every part of the then known world, from the Black Sea to Sicily, right up to the Pillars of Hercules in today's Gibraltar, founding colonies along the way. This commercial activity allowed, at the same time, invaluable cultural exchanges. The Athenians managed available capital according to supply and demand, even initiating large-scale public works when unemployment was high. They turned economic prosperity into a warm place for art, science, and culture to bloom. On the antipode, though, ancient Greece can also teach us lessons to be avoided today. In particular, how the lack of unity or division and rivalry, which was the case between ancient city-states, can bring about a devastating conflict, such as the Peloponnesian War, which crippled Greek military strength, bringing the most culturally advanced Greek city-state, Athens, into its decline. Today's book that I gave you, The Pericles Funeral, is a testimony for that. Luckily, there stand monuments like the Acropolis you see outside of this room that remind us of all these and some core developments in the history of democracy and human creativity, which first emerged at the time of Pericles, but remain valid and pertinent today. It's a miracle that we're able to behold such iconic monuments and be reminded of the values they represent, which are at the core of our contemporary European identity and shape what it means to be a European citizen today. Speaking of what it means to be a European citizen today, I would like to say farewell to my dear colleague Ignacio Visco, since this is his last governing council meeting after 12 years at the helm. At the helm of Banca d'Italia. With Ignacio, we have traveled together. A long journey in the last several years. During this journey, full of storms, but also some sunny periods, we have appreciated his integrity, intellectual honesty, wisdom, judgment, common sense, diligence, and positive attitude. He has remained a true European citizen, faithful to the euro, supporting it in its most difficult times. A central banker who believes that price stability, financial stability, and full employment can coexist if the right mix of policies finds its way in the member states of the euro area, but above all, at its center, with coordination, cooperation, win-win mentality, and positive steps towards deeper integration. I found myself in full agreement with most of what he has said and advocated. We will miss him in the meetings of the ECB Governing Council. I'm sure, however, that whatever he's going to do from now on, he will have the same influence and gravitas as with what he did up to now, for the benefit of the world, Europe, as well as his country. Thank you. So I would like to ask Kyriakos Mitsotakis to take the floor.
And now I have to give a boring speech about the economy. What a reversal of roles. I should be speaking, Yanis, about democracy and the history of Western civilization, and you should be talking about economic developments. Well, dear President Lagarde, dear Governor Sturnarras, dear members of the Governing Council, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to welcome you, the Governing Council of the ECB, to Athens. The last time the ECB Council met in this ancient, glorious city, as Yanis pointed out, was in May 2008. And a lot has happened since. And over the previous decade, our monetary union went through major, perhaps the existential crisis. Yet, despite severe turbulence and setbacks, we overcame unprecedented challenges, and in many respects, we emerged stronger. At the union level, previously missing important safety nets were put in place, including the ESM and the banking union, the later agreed during the Greek presidency of 2014. National economies, particularly those most impacted by the crisis, implemented far-reaching fiscal and structural reforms, increasing their competitiveness and improving public finances. I will speak about Greece in a moment. But on the whole, those economies most tested by markets over the previous decade are now much stronger and resilient, as the same markets attest. And for the record, I wish to acknowledge the ECB's pivotal role in overcoming those challenges and the pledge to do whatever it takes to preserve the euro, provided a crucial anchor stabilizing market expectations, putting in place the necessary platform for recovery to begin, and leveraging the beneficial effects of ECB liquidity provision programs. Ladies and gentlemen, the last 4 years have seen their own set of extraordinary events, including the pandemic, Russia's illegal war of aggression against Ukraine, and elevated climate-related risks as manifested by natural disasters of increasing frequency and severity, including those we experienced this summer in Greece. Europe also faces a productivity challenge, which actually predated the pandemic, which, if unaddressed, may have far-reaching implications for long-term growth and employment, our geopolitical standing, and the euro's international role. Our collective response to the pandemic and the energy crisis triggered by Russia's aggression, I believe, has been very successful in protecting the production fabric of our economies, in supporting households. And again, the ECB's contribution to this success has been decisive, including its support for Greece, dear Christine, for which I want to express my appreciation. At the same time, the introduction of Next Generation EU and the Recovery and Resilience Facility in particular was a true milestone for the European Union and goes a long way towards addressing the needs of the twin transition to a green and digital economy. But having said that, there is no room for complacency. The fiscal and inflation fallout of the pandemic and the energy crisis, respectively, are substantial, warranting the shift towards monetary and fiscal normalization currently underway. And in relation to this, Greece fully supports the institutional mandate of the ECB to deliver price stability. And our fiscal policy, involving primarily surpluses as of last year, is very well aligned with this objective. Downside risks for the global and European economy, of course, continue to exist. Just witness what is currently happening in our neighborhood in the Middle East. And despite significant RRF funding for the green and digital transitions, we still have a significant financial gap for investments in these, but also in other areas. And at the union level, I believe this calls for action on two fronts. First, to protect public investment, preserve sustainable growth alongside fiscal adjustment, and ensure the financing of new needs in areas such as climate adaptation and migration, which is a big challenge, a big political challenge for all of us. And forthcoming decisions on open files, such as the European Governance Review and the revision of the multi-year financial framework, must deliver on these objectives. We will have our first discussion on the revision of the MFF tomorrow, and I don't expect it to yield significant results. We should also revisit in due course the introduction of a central fiscal capacity to enhance insurance against business cycle excessive fluctuations, but also to finance European public goods. We've set the bar very high in terms of what we want to achieve as Europe. We need the financial tools to actually get there. Second, we need to crowd in private investment. And this calls for the completion of the banking union through the introduction of its third pillar and endorsement of the Commission's proposal on CMDI, as well as deepening the capital markets union, allowing European firms, including small, medium-sized ones, to mobilize European international savings to increase growth, employment, and inclusive prosperity. Achieving these goals, of course, requires growth-friendly and sustainable national policies. Some of you were present here in Athens for that last Council's meeting that I referred to earlier. A lot has happened since. And today I'm delighted, indeed proud, to welcome you and all colleagues here today to a country that is on a very different path compared to those times. It's a country in the process of what I believe is a fundamental economic transformation. Greece is now one of the fastest growing economies in Europe, with increasing employment, with falling inequalities, and with improving public finances. In recent years, we've seen a major increase in our economy's openness and extroversion. It's a factor that is crucial for a small, open economy in order for it to prosper within a monetary union. Not many people know that Greek exports have increased from roughly 1/5 of GDP at the beginning of the crisis to about half of GDP today, a level similar to major exporting Eurozone economies. And our exports base is well diversified. It's evenly split between goods and services, with significant diversification among various goods categories. The Greek economy is not a one-trick pony, dependent just on tourism. And against past advice for some quarters, the transformation of Greece's external sector has been taking place, thank God, without a nominal devaluation. It is the result of very deep structural reforms which took place over many years. Very painful reforms, very difficult political reforms, which addressed Greece's supply-side challenges, as well as the institutional attractiveness of being a member of the Eurozone. And a non-exhaustive list of reforms we have implemented over the past 4 years includes significantly digitizing the Greek state, but also supporting the digitization of the private sector, significant reforming labor markets, supporting the green transition. Greece is today one of the leaders in the world in terms of its production of energy from renewable sources. Education reform, a fully funded supplementary pension system, returning the state electricity company to financial health and making it a protagonist in the broader region, simplifying licensing procedures, reducing red tape, and continuing with privatizations. Furthermore, and aiming to improve incentives for firms and labor, we prioritize alleviating the excessive tax burden for labor and capital, not consumption, while observing fiscal discipline. We've been able to reduce the tax burden in a reasonable manner while maintaining and achieving our fiscal targets. Social security contributions were cut, as well as the corporate income tax rate. Fiscal measures of support to counteract the shocks of the COVID, energy, and the cost of living crisis were both targeted and temporary, but they were effective in terms of protecting jobs and supporting the more vulnerable. They prevented scaring. They supported those in most need while maintaining well-anchored expectations for debt sustainability. And these reforms have considerably improved Greece's business environment. They've attracted record inward foreign direct investment in 2021, in 2022, again in 2023. They're making a substantial contribution to increasing the share of investment as a percentage of GDP. And bringing in foreign capital remains a top priority for this government. It is crucial for covering the narrowing but still existing investment gap of the previous years. We are now in a position to turn this disadvantage into an opportunity. The high expected profitability Greece displays as an economy converging with the euro area average, combined with the monetary predictability offered by the ECB's unrivaled policy credibility, and what I think is very important, the high degree of political stability Greece now enjoys, render our economy a very attractive destination for domestic and foreign investors. If you walk through Athens today, you were able to pick up the vibe of a booming city, attracting investors across the board. And this in tandem with significant inflows that Greece receives in the context of the RRF and other European financial instruments has given us a foundation, I believe, to do something exceptional, and that is to essentially repeat the economic miracle Greece achieved in the 50s and 60s and materialize what is my main objective, to increase the living standards through higher real wages financed by growth and not by debt. And my government has been tasked with taking full advantage of this historic opportunity. And we will definitely deliver on this task. And in this effort, of course, the financial sector plays a key role. I remember in 2019, when we came to power, the first question that I always received from foreign investors is, what are you going to do with your banks? The Greek banking system was saddled with legacy NPEs that amounted to roughly half of its loan book. And cleaning up banks was a top priority to regain creditworthiness, but also to jumpstart economic growth through financing increased investment. And we used the highly successful Hercules asset protection scheme. We've been able to reduce Greece's NPE ratio to single-digit levels, while capital increases by systemic banks further strengthen their position. And today, critics actually point to Greek bank profitability. Rest assured, we will not squander our hard-earned credibility by listening to the siren voices of populism. And looking ahead, the Hellenic Financial Stability Fund will be disposing of its stake in the 4 systemic banks by the end of 2025. Eurobank is already the first bank to return to full private ownership. And another important step to this objective came earlier this week with Italy's UniCredit offer for the HFSF stake in Alpha Bank. And we invite other European financial institutions to take a good look at Greek banks. It was a very important milestone for us to have a major European bank express an interest. For a Greek bank, it seems as if things have indeed come full circle. And in addition to restoring the health of the banking sector, Greece is one of the first countries to adopt the EU's single insolvency framework, creating for the first time a streamlined restructuring and bankruptcy process, a prerequisite for deepening capital markets and maximizing the potential of the banking union. And the advantages of this new framework are also increasingly clear in data relating to legacy private debt, offering further confirmation of the transformation of the Greek economy, not only at a macro, but also at a micro level. And our economy's positive outlook is strongly underpinned by fast improving public finances. We have already returned to primary surpluses. Our headline budget deficit in 2023 and 2024 is projected to be one of the smallest of any country in the developed world. And although our debt to GDP ratio remains high, over the last couple of years, this has dropped by more than any other country in the world and is projected to drop below its 2012 levels this year. And we are committed to fiscal discipline and the benefit that this accrues to our citizens and firms. And the plunge in the debt to GDP ratio shows that the denominator matters as much as the numerator. Growth has accelerated in recent years. Greece's GDP having grown nearly 5 percentage points more than the euro average since 2019. And this is, I believe, is a fact that should not go unnoticed when we will make our decisions on the new European fiscal rules. And fiscal discipline and structural reform performance has been rewarded with full access to sovereign bond markets, I'm sure to the relief of Christine, at narrowing spreads and the regaining of investment grade, the most recent one being by S&P Global last Friday. And this opens up the road for further improvement in financial conditions. A study by the Bank of Greece finds that half the benefit of achieving investment grade accrues after the upgrade itself. And I would like at this point to thank the economic team, previous Minister of Finance, Christos Taikouras, the Minister of Finance, Kostis Hatzidakis, their team. This has been a team effort. We put a lot of work to be able to put ourselves in this position. And we will continue down this path because the job of reforming the economy never ends. A lot of hard work lies ahead. Looking into the remainder of my second term as Prime Minister, we still have almost 4 years ahead of us with a strong mandate and an absolute majority in Parliament. You will see a lot more work towards fighting tax evasion, using big data analytics. You will see an emphasis on justice reform, which we know is still a thorny issue that we need to address. We need to expand our labor supply and participation. We need to make capital markets reform. But to conclude, politically, Greece has a positive message for Europe too. You're bankers, we're politicians. And if you wanted proof that centrist politicians can and do win elections against populism, then look no further than this country. For 2 consecutive terms, the Greek people have chosen the path of stability and reform over the path of chaos and populism. Ladies and gentlemen, let me close by saying that my country spent the previous decade trying to stay in the euro. It will spend this decade converging to Europe. Staying in the euro was not easy, but Greece is undoubtedly a story of success. And today, in this wonderful setting, it is indeed a day to reflect on the past. It's a day to rejoice on what has been achieved together, but also to look forward to the future. Here's to showcasing Greece and Europe's further progress when the next ECB meeting is next held in this extraordinary city. Thank you all for being here.
2 tough acts to follow, I have to say. Dear Prime Minister, Madame Mitsotakis, dear Governor, Madame Sturnarras, dear Minister Hatzidakis, Dr. Hatzidakis, members of the Governing Council, spouses of the members of the Governing Council, guests, staff members of the Bank of Greece, and staff members of the ECB, it is an absolute pleasure to be here tonight. And for those of you who would like me to talk about art, I've given up. Yanis has taken the stage. For those of you who'd like me to talk about economics, I've given up. The Prime Minister has taken up the stage. So what shall I talk about? Monetary policy? No, because this is tomorrow morning. So I can at least say thank you. And I would like to thank you, Yanis, your spouse, all members of the team who have made this meeting, so far, an extraordinary meeting outside of Frankfurt. This is the 38th meeting off base, outside of our normal setting, in the impressive headquarters of the Bank of Greece. And when you look around and you look at these extraordinary paintings of the late 19th century, most of them painting marines and naval battles and major events in the history of Greece. And when you look to the left, or to the right for most of you, and you see the Parthenon, and you've listened carefully to what Yanis has told us, you cannot but be impressed by the sense of heritage and continuity that is inspiring us from whichever corner of Europe we come from. As you told us, Yanis, this is the home of Pericles, and we've heard it many times in our life, the cradle of democracy, the etymology of which I will not challenge, Yanis, you're right. But you gave us a lot more than Pericles. You gave us Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and the foundations of our philosophy. The ancient Greek taught us mathematics with Euclides, and science with Archimedes, and poetry with Homer, and beautiful opera with Maria Callas, whose 100th anniversary is this year. And this is not to mention the timeless contributions to theater, art, and architecture that Greek civilization has given to us. Over millennia, these different threads have been central to forming an idea of what it means to be European. One based on, as you said, democracy, justice, reason, measure. And without this idea, I find it hard to imagine that we could have eventually one day, a couple of decades ago, decided to have one single currency, the euro. And the fact that we are all here today owes much to the history of this place. But what the brightest minds of this country have also taught us is that it is not only the destination that matters, but the journey. As modern Greece's most celebrated poet, Constantin Cavafy, wrote in his poem Ithaca, I translate, "Keep Ithaca always in your mind. Arriving there is what you are destined for. But by the time you reach the island, you will be wealthy with all you've gained on the way." And this sentiment, I think, speaks to the story of Greece in recent times. You have told us, Prime Minister, the hardship and the long journey traveled by your country, by its economy, and more importantly, by its people. It has been long and it has been hard. But your country and your people never lost sight of destination, and much, I'm sure, has been gained along the way. As we all know, the crisis erupted in recent time in 2009 in Greece. And the programs, the fiscal adjustments, the structural reforms that it entailed took an exceptionally heavy toll. You were just a little bit like Ulysses returning to Ithaca, facing the thunder of Poseidon, helped by the strength of Athena along the way, but meeting all these obstacles, from Circe to Calypso to the Cyclope, of course. But each and every time along the way, you were stronger and went further. Many of us have forgotten that between 2009 and 2016, your country, Greece, shrunk by 25%. So when you describe where Greece is today, we also have to measure how much progress, journey, hardship you had to face along the way. And just as the economy was recovering and the reforms were finally bearing fruit, disaster struck again. The pandemic brought travel and tourism to a standstill. And Greece's economy, as if it hadn't been enough with 25% shrinking, lost 9% of its GDP in 2020. Throughout this period, Greece has been to the forefront of the global challenges facing Europe. The climate crisis has been ever present, as was demonstrated tragically this summer, and Greece has also borne the brunt of the various migration crises that have hit Europe. And yet, a bit like Ulysses, despite this succession of setbacks, the country's resilience has been remarkable. Thanks to the hard work that you have led, Prime Minister, to make the economy more flexible, Greece has made an impressive comeback after the pandemic. Real GDP per capita is now almost 10% above its pre-pandemic level. There are many countries in Europe and in the world that would like to actually showcase such a stellar number. The unemployment rate has also declined steeply and was at its lowest level since 2009. And with a stronger economy, the country has been able to work further through its debt challenge. You've mentioned that. Record reduction of its debt by more than 30% in a couple of years. And the two rating agencies that you've mentioned have clearly indicated that markets are looking at Greece with a different eyes. But it's not just the economy that is resilient. The people of Greece are the ones that are the most resilient. There were times, and I remember that vividly, as you do, as many of us in this room do, there was a time when, just like Ulysses could have listened to the mermaids and the sirens, Greece could have listened to other voices and decided not to. You have remained committed to being at the heart of Europe, even in the hardest time. In fact, Greek support for the common currency, the euro, has risen 16 percentage points over the last decade, and with more than 3/4 of the public now in favor of the euro and supporting Europe. So this example, as you said yourself, can really be setting standards and be an inspiration for all of us as we contend with a more volatile world and dreadful events that are developing in the Middle East and elsewhere. It is an example of resilience in the face of the greatest challenges, and it is an example of the importance of being part of somebody that is bigger, which is our shared European destiny. So as we stand here in the heart of Athens, we see the best of what Europe can be, a place that is rooted in the past, alive with its history, but also one imbued with cultural and economic vigor, energy, and with its eyes set firmly on the future. I think it would be hard to find a city that can better display that European spirit. So it's with great gratitude that I accept your invitation for a further off-site retreat of the Governing Council of the ECB.